Okay, so basically I was just saying that as part of our activities, the Robinson project prepared a white paper on replication with other 9 sister projects, where we addressed the non-technical challenges, also technical challenges, and we provided with recommendations to the policymakers from the European Commission and also the national member states. So the main takeaways from this presentation is that we wanted to raise awareness around the challenges and opportunities we have for replicating the sustainable projects. And this comes in a stage where Robinson project is approaching the replication of its own concept also in the replication islands. So to start with the non-technical challenges, our project experienced some non-technical challenges, specifically on regulations. As Frank will also mention in his presentation, we experienced particular the lack of comprehensive and clear and also coherent regulations and policies at the national level, which is somehow creating obstacles to the implementation of replication activities. What we also experience is that the replication of the decarbonisation islands project requires also innovative, sustainable financing mechanisms, which shall aim at facilitating the purchase of equipment, installation, and investments on technologies, as well as capacity building, the latter being a key factor for guaranteeing the ownership of the project. So, for the local community. The last matter is the public acceptance, where we underlined in our white paper the need for promoting behavioral changes. So a key problematic is that stakeholders at the national level, at the European level, should be aware of the need for awareness campaigns to promote the adoption of new renewable energy sources, technologies, and also change of consumption patterns. Now, if we switch to the other slide, the next one, we also see that the replication is a much more complex matter, which is requiring tailored adaptations and modifications depending on the geographical needs of the project. So what we addressed to the stakeholders is also the need for granularity of the analysis and modeling work, harmonization of flexibility products, and also scalability, which is requiring specific planning. So the engagement of stakeholders is hence needed from the initial stage of the project. What we addressed in Robinson was a later readaptation of the mechanism of the installation of our islands due to some various updates, new feedback from the local community, as Søren will later explain in detail. So what we need is essentially the guidance from the very beginning in order to ensure adoption and also implementation of the project solutions without any further delays. So energy and economic savings shall be hence the main driver to promote the application of the projects. So these are the challenges we experienced in our project, and then we later came with some key recommendations. So as we said, it is important to engage with local stakeholders from the very beginning of the project, which is also why, in our experience, We see difficulties in other initiatives at the local level. And we also need long-term planning. So we need targets which are setting clear, realistic decarbonization targets, energy efficiency, and also the development of integrated energy systems. So financing mechanisms is also another matter that we the stakeholders should work more on. So specifically with partnerships, crowdfunding platforms, but more than that, also grants and incentives. So the investments here are also requiring the reduction of financial barriers. So this is a matter that would require further alignment among the European institutions and also the member states. And the second and final slide before giving the floor to Frank is also as I said, clear regulations, but clear regulations means somehow the involvement of policymakers to streamline the permitting processes. We see most of the times that the installation of new technologies is requiring the alignment with let's say permitting processes that are related, let's say, to tourism or to the prevention. There are some regulations which are somehow related, for example, to tourism, to natural goods, and these would need further alignment. So this in turn would create, let's say, the quick adoption of new technologies, for example, by modifying safety regulations for hydrogen storage, we will have a faster replication of our sustainable projects. Then we have also the comprehensive monitoring and evaluation frameworks. What we did see in the Robinson project was specifically also the need to establish a framework by which we can track our results, we can track the areas where we need further improvement and where we need further cooperation with the local stakeholders. So for this, we need the evaluation of technical data, which is ranging from, for instance, energy consumption, emission reduction, cost savings, and also social benefits. So in order to do this, also local stakeholders have to really reinvent their own awareness campaigns. What we saw sometimes is an amount of institutions which is correctly proceeding with a top-down approach for the implementation of decarbonization initiatives, but at the same time, these awareness campaigns should really address the needs of the local community. So more action, let's say, on the ground, with more foot on the ground, would be needed. So this was, in a nutshell, the presentation of the white paper, which was already presented in September last year, and that gathered attention also from the policymakers. So the intention is also somehow to influence the process of calls for the decarbonization of violence at the European level, where we really see somehow obstacles which should be and could be resolved quite quickly. So this was just an introduction before moving to the more specific technical slides of Frank and also of Søren. So I would now give the floor first to Frank and then to Søren, and then we could create a sort of, we would have a question and answers session. So Frank, I would give you the floor. Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Frank Richert. Hopefully you see right now on the right screen. So it should be the full screen, not the presentation mode. Is it right?
Yes.
Okay. So Frank Richert. So we from the company REST, we work in the field of project development and realization of decentralized energy systems with a focus on the use of wind energy. My presentation is a little bit about regulatory aspects of distributed energy systems. So you already see that there are different terms to characterize these kind of systems. So in respect of regulation, you mostly get the name distributed energy sources. This is a sketch of the ROBINSON project we are involved in. And as you can see that there are several energy resources which are connected to different grids. It's not just the power grid. We have the thermal heat grid or local gas grid, but also we include waste and combine it. So this is an overview. It is, and you can see from this sketch that all the different connection to the different type of local or distributed grids might be not easy in terms of regulation, especially if you look at it on a European level. There are some regulatory aspects. There's maybe three main issues which needs to be considered in terms of getting their systems realized. So first of all is the planning and siting and getting permits. So these kind of regulation will definitely restrict the planning and siting of theirs. So it means that you need to understand which regulations need to be fulfilled for the specific area. Mostly the planning and siting permits is about balancing environmental concerns, land use, so who's owning the land, on which to place your system, but also community preferences are quite critical. If it comes to interconnection to the grid and getting grid access, of course, you need the regulators need to establish clear rules for the interconnection of the DER. And as I said, it's not just the power; it's also the heat or thermal and gas grid. You need to have some technical standards and safety protocols and procedures for this kind of grid access. And that is especially on the European level not easy to achieve. And what we also faced is that you need to ensure fair and non-discriminatory access to the grid for all different type of technologies we talk about. Wind energy, solar power, and all the stuff. So there are quite different possibilities to get access to the grid. And what is of course quite important is somehow compensation mechanisms. So you need to determine how the owners of the systems are compensated for the energy they generate and feed into the grid. And this is of course essential to get it financed. But these compensation mechanisms should also consider different type. So whether you have a self-consumption or you have excess export, or you just provide grid services, as services to the grid. So this needs to be handled somehow in some kind of standards. If you look, for example, on the operation permits, of course, the DER system depends on local condition possibilities. And what we see, we don't have a standard system. So we have a lot of different individual subsystems and all of those needs maybe operation permits. So that's not easy to get. And what is of course quite risky is that not all permits you get in time or at all. That means you might get a permission for your PV system, but not for the wind. But in order to have a financial or economic solution, you need to get all of the system in place. Within the permission procedure, these conducted by the administrative authorities, mostly the impact of a proposed operation system on the living environmental is evaluated. So it means that is the main issue, which is controlled by the normal permission, how your system will interact with the environment. And for this, there are no uniform standards throughout Europe. That's definitely clear. So nationally, regionally, they have the same, let's say, value system. That means protection of the environment, which is implied in principle, but may have different limited values. For example, how much is the distance from the wind turbine to the next household, or what is the emission limits, etc. So all of this will have a very strong influence on the economic viability of the DES system. As I mentioned, for example, if you are not allowed to use wind energy in the vicinity of the consumer, that will have definitely influence. And we are right now faced with the ROBINSON project, where we intend to build up a wind turbine in Norway, and it seems to be that we don't get it connected or get a permission for that. So that means that a resource with a high value in terms of economics you can't use, and for that reason the complete economics of the complete DES system might be in question. And what is also important, if you get a permission to operation permit for operation of the system itself, you need in parallel also permits for grid connection. So they are not linked to each other. So if you get an official permit to connect your system on the site, it's nice. But if you're not get a permission to connect it to a specific grid, then you're out. As an example, just look on the regulation for mostly power grid connection, because these are most regulated. If you connect to gas or thermal heat grids, they are still not that much regulated like the power. So we have a lot of multiple rules and regulation with local, national, and European validity for connection to the grid, of course. And the EU regulation tries to harmonize those connections with their so-called network curve on requirements for grid connection of generators, so the NCRGs, which has been established in 2016. And there are a lot of organizations who try now to set this into place, like the ENSO. And so there's a group ENSO-E that does it for the power control. And there's an ENSO-G, which looks for the gas grid connection. There are some European standards like the EN 50459, which intends to serve as a technical reference for the definition of the national requirements, because the NCs allow for some flexible implementation, and in order to strengthen it and to condense it, there need to be specific standards like the EN 50449. But these specification guidelines do not really get sufficiently include the design of different DES systems with their especially multiple possibilities for energy conversion and storage. Especially storage is an issue, because the storage has main impact on how to operate the grid. And so regulation regarding storage, it's really up to come, and there's really no big standards available in most European countries. So there are some expert groups like the MCS and storage. So they have been established by the Grid Connection European Stakeholder Committee. They try to develop proposals for the adaptation of these requirements to future DES systems. So there are a lot of different, especially in the different countries, a lot of groups who try to set up these standards. As it is often in the US, we might have already good standards for their systems and microgrids, but they have not been translated into the European Commission yet. So, and to show you, for example, for how this regulation of power grid connection could look like, or looks like actually. So the NCRGs try to make a corresponding grid connection standard must be implemented in the European member state. So each member state needs to come up with a certain standard. And mainly this was done for the cross-border transmission of electrical energy. But this is divided into the fixed pan-European ones and national regulations. And there was one demand, as you say, each member state has to define the 3 power capacity thresholds, A, B, C, and D. And for each type, additional and different grid connection requirements will apply. And now look at this picture here. This, let's say, throughout Europe, you can see how the different member states now try to set up these, at least the thresholds, that you say, okay, what type of do we have below 1 megawatt, below 10 megawatt, below 50 megawatt, above 10 megawatt, 50 megawatt, and you can see that even that the member state has been able to have a clear common understanding how this limit could be. So it means dependent on in which country you live and you try to set up your there, you have some consequences in terms of regulation you need to fulfill with your system. So what are main takeaways we conclude within Robinson so far when designing a kind of standardized system? And we talk about mainly connected to the power grid. The topology is crucial. So where is the point of connection is located, behind the meter, in front of the meter, what kind of power level you have. You need to understand what is the order of magnitude. If you have a very low, I mean, we talk of 1 megawatt, which is normally a very low and very small system. And it must be taken into account with regard to requirements for the connection of subsystem. So even the classification into the category of if you have a type A or B, which is most likely the most common system in terms of power, you have different requirements nationally to fulfill. So what we're looking for is a systematic view for distributed connections of those subsystems to existing distribution grids, or central connection conditions of the systems organized in microgrids, which is most likely the case, would improve integration and dissemination of their systems. So that is what everybody is looking for. We need a systematic view for those systems, including especially the storage capability of the DES systems. So approaches for this are already being developed at the European level, as I mentioned before. And this topic is also being addressed in the Horizon 2020 Bridge Regulation Work Group, which we are part of. Okay, maybe this is a very, very short overview of the very complex area of regulations. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Frank. I was muted. So before moving to the questions on your presentations, I would just ask you to wait a little bit before we move to Søren, so that he can present now on the social acceptance experiences on Robinson. So Søren, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. So now you should see my presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I will present is the results from a mid-term assessment we made of the Robinson project, focusing on the social acceptance and impact. We reported our results in 5 main themes, which the first one is local drivers for innovation, or energy innovation. We have some lessons about acceptance of single technologies in the integrated system. Then there's something about the importance of trust. There's something about how to organize these integrated decentralized energy systems. And then finally, a bit about what we observed as the impact of the Robinson project locally. And as I said, this is kind of result of some studies we made more or less halfway through the project, or in the first half, and we'll follow this up by making a follow-up assessment at the end of the project lifetime. So a bit about the scope and context. As I said, we are investigating the social impact and the acceptance at IGARI, the demonstration project island. We have focused on looking at different stakeholders' views and interests around this project, both those who are directly involved in the project, but also some of those local stakeholders who are not directly involved in Robinson. And then I think it's also important to mention for the context of this project that it's the kind of all the installations are happening at an industrial harbor area, which I will say have limited or minimal externalities for the rest of the citizens. With some small exceptions, I will get back to that. Just a few words about our data collection. So it's mainly based on consultations with stakeholders, as I mentioned, but it's also supplemented by the observations and discussions we have had in kind of project-related meetings. More technically, the way we talk to the stakeholders is to use what we call a semi-structured approach, which means that we prepare some themes and questions, but during these conversations, we also allow the responders to bring up some themes on their own initiative. And there's been quite in-depth talks we have with the stakeholders. Longest one up to 1.5 hours, and the shorter ones have been only around 30 minutes for those who are only kind of very remotely connected to the activity. Most of them were carried out as in-person consultation, and some of them was also online. Before we started the consultations, we also categorized the different stakeholders in 3 main categories or main parameters. The first one is ownership. So some of them are public entities, some are private, and some are what we call other kind of ownership around the organizations that we talk to. Then we also emphasize the geographical location or extension. Some of the stakeholders are very locally based. Some of them are international, and some of them are kind of have one leg in a local and one leg in some more international organization. And then finally, of course, also the role in an energy system. So here especially it's important, is it an energy consumer or is it mainly energy producer? And also the third category is quite important, I think, in Robinson projects, which is kind of stakeholders who are not being influential as consumers or producers or consumers, but more like we call it intermediaries or organizations that have an influence locally in other ways. As I said, we approached the stakeholders with already some prepared questions and themes we'd like to talk about. And there were 5 main themes. The first one was their energy concerns and objectives in general. What thoughts I have about this. The second one were about thoughts about technologies, energy technologies, and how that related to the overall concerns. The third one was if they identified or could see any barriers and also supporting elements for their wishes and technology strategies, if they had any. Fourth one was policies implementations, if they could see any regulatory barriers, for example, for pursuing their strategies. And then the fifth one is more specifically for a Robinson project, how did the Robinson project fit into all these categories above? And of course, as you mentioned, although we have some common themes, the questions of course varied a bit according to if you talk to an energy consumer would have a bit different questions than energy producer, of course. As I said, we summarized our observations in 5 lessons. The first one is we say the local drivers for participating in energy innovation, and there we could see there's quite clear pattern that we could categorize these drivers in 3 categories. One being environmental concerns, one being how it could contribute to local and regional development in broad sense, and the third one was adapting to the very volatile energy markets, which started to take off in this period where we collected the data. So these 3 themes were common across all stakeholders, but of course some stakeholders would give more weight to one of them. For example, energy consumers would be very concerned about energy prices and energy markets, for example. Then there was, I think there was one technology where difficulties about the social acceptance or local acceptance. That was the small scale wind turbine, which was difficult to find a model for everyone, or to really to build it and to install it on the island. And we tried to assess this based on what we had identified as local drivers, and their kind of take on this is that the problem or barrier for this technology is that it did not kind of tick all the 3 boxes. It only ticked one of them. As of course, a small wind power turbine will provide environmental friendly energy. But for that specific concept, it was not price competitive in Norway, which means it didn't really address the concerns about the energy market and prices. And then there was also a third one. It did not create directly any local development, so to speak, since it was an international supplier of the technology. And then another thing of very, I think, interesting learning is when we talked, especially when we talk to large energy consumers, well, their main concerns were security of supply and the cost of energy, and also to some extent our environment, but especially kind of certainty of having energy at a specific price was quite important to them. And their take on this decentralized integrated energy system is that they were very uncertain about it, and perceived as quite complex concept. And some of them also emphasized the importance of having a kind of what they call a trusted local partner to go to. So some of them were a bit reluctant, not because they were against the concept in itself, but they had a lot of kind of uncertainty around it, and therefore it kind of perhaps gave the lesson that you need somehow a local organization, a partner that can perhaps be the local face of this concept and create trust around it. Another bit related lesson was that this ROBINSON concept and concepts that looks like ROBINSON is often based a lot of many different technical components, and you have very many different partners involved. And this again could seem complex for local stakeholders, and then also some pointed out that they felt that there need to be some kind of more local coordination, locally based coordination on a day-to-day basis. Some also use the term a one-stop shop, so you kind of have one place to go and one shop that kind of answer your questions and deliver what you need. So kind of this way to handle the daily coordination and also building trust locally kind of emerged as a key organizational theme for these kind of systems. And then finally, a bit about the impact. I think what's perhaps surprised us a bit, but also I think was interesting, is that the impact of a Robinson project is not only what happens within the project itself, but also a lot of spin-off activity that come from that Robinson project. So several stakeholders mentioned that this project have been an occasion for increasing local collaboration, which again then foster new ideas about energy innovation. And it also created some attention to the local area, which have made it possible to create new partnerships with new partners outside the local area, because the Robinson project has been promoting the area as an area where you do energy innovation, and in general also just creating attention to the island. So in summary, we see that addressing local drivers and the local motivations are kind of key for success and for local acceptance. And we also see that these new integrated energy systems require some new organizational forms if you want to replicate it in larger scale. And then finally, we also saw that the Robinson project really has ignited some local energy innovation, which go beyond the project itself. That was it.
Thank you, Søren. So this was the spring before the last presentation, where we address all the non-technical topics of Robinson. So as you are maybe already aware, this is a typical case in which other also sister projects have to, let's say, readapt the solutions. And this shows you also the complexity of our initiative. So as discussed at the very beginning of this webinar, I intend to open the floor for any questions, answers you may have to our presenters, or even comments based on your experience with your projects. So already, yes, please.
I see Peter, I have his hand up.
Yeah, I was not sure if I should just ask or yeah, raise the hand. So I rose the hand. According, I mean, we in the project there are kind of three challenges, I would say, right? One is these kind of what we engineers love most is actually the technical challenges. Then we have those which Frank presented, the regulatory ones. I mean, I have the impression that we have to live with what we have today, because if we want to wait for those to be harmonized across a country or across Europe, even worse, I would guess that the whole energy transition will be over by then. But that's my personal opinion on these kind of more political regulatory processes. And then the third one is actually the what Søren mentioned, is a social acceptance one. How would you, looking at such a project like Robinson, how would you rank them? So in terms of, you know, what is the one having the highest kind of impact on the progress and success of such a project?
At least to answer the first part of your question, Peter, you're absolutely right. I mean, to wait for a European standard to be set up and say we can now fulfill we can go with our system European wide. It's not the way forward. We need to have local solutions where we can just discuss the case with local authorities, try to get the permits on. But we affect, especially to the grid operators, because they look for the international standards. As long as they are not there, they are maybe not willing to make certain rules for your location, because they say just step back and say we wait until the European standards are set up and then we go on. So this may be a bottleneck, the DSO and TSOs of the world, because they are maybe not like the decentralized energy systems as much as we from the area where we want to promote systems to come up and have setting up microgrids, for example. It's a very strong issue to get this done due to the behavior of the DSOs and TSOs worldwide or European wide.
I think it's a good question, Peter. Actually, I would say that I think they all are a bit interrelated. I mean, for example, the social acceptance, you will not have social acceptance if it's not demonstrated that the technical solutions works. So in that way, the social acceptance will lead to the technical nerds in a way. Then, of course, it's often the case that actually the technical solutions is more or less ready. So, yeah, so then it becomes more the social things that is a barrier. And I think also some of the social acceptance issues can also relate to the regulation. So, for example, when I talk about the need for perhaps having new sort of organizations locally and so on, it could be that you need just a small tweak to regulation for making that happen. But perhaps you don't need it. It depends very much on the case. But I will tend to say this social acceptance is the most important. But also, again, they can only happen if you have the right regulatory conditions and the technology that works.
René, I see you have raised a hand. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Nicolò, hello, René Vege here. Yes, as coordinator of Robinson, I struggled a lot with the basically use case windmill at Cairo, you know. We tried several options, and unfortunately, all of them didn't realize, not because of social acceptance, but just because the business case did not happen. So my conclusion of this is, when the money is not there, nothing happens. Even though CO2 is an important issue, it seems that I don't know if it is the spirit of the Norwegian people, but it seems that money is very important. And for me, this was quite striking, to be very honest.
Yeah, I don't know if this is Norwegian specific. I mean, we have more or less the same problem in Scotland, where we try to set up the turbine now. But as I said, if you don't have a concluded permitting process, so you go for permission to get an operation, but you're not allowed to get a grid connection of different parts, then you're out, because financially you need to conclude everything in one system. But if you have the permission split over the place, and then you go to a different area, to a different location, and then you are faced with different regulations due to the local DSO or to the local authority, then you get lost, because you never know how to get things together and what are the financial aspects. You are right. At the end, money talks, and they say, okay, if you can provide energy in a competitive way, that's the way you need to go forward. If you're not, you're out.
But wouldn't that change if you kind of connect it behind the meter?
Yeah, of course, and because but right now the regulation, although you connect behind the meter, you need to fulfill the system need to fulfill the requirement on the point of connection. Still,
about power quality, you mean? So
yeah, power quality, of course, and so that is, and then you are completely in front of this kind of discussion, which I try to show in my presentation. And that's European-wide context then.
If I should just supplement, then I tend to agree a lot with your perspective, René. that especially for large scale kind of replication, you need some economics that works. But if you look at the aggregate material we have, then we use the term local value as a bit broader term, and that local value could both be financial value, and it could be environmental concerns, and then the third one was local or regional development. So if you create some kind of local activity around it, also economic activity that perhaps not connected directly to a windmill, but if someone can supply the windmill and so on, they create some development. Because if you compare to other cases, I think we've sometimes seen that politically it can happen if, for example, if it addresses environmental concerns and it creates some local activity, sometimes the politician will make the economics work in the short term at least, until it kind of develops further. I think that's a story about the wind energy in Denmark, for example. So yeah, I agree the economics are important, but also I think sometimes you can also go a bit broader and just talking about local value.
Yeah, but if you look on local, I mean, in every city you can't build up a new wind turbine facility to produce wind turbines in the town. I mean, if you go national wide, that's fine, but that doesn't count for their system on the specific area, because they say, okay, what is the local benefit here in my town? And normally you can't provide, say, we will build up every case a new facility to produce wind turbines.
That's right. That's where you have to be price competitive then.
Yeah, at the end it's cost. Yeah.
But I mean, if the local people would have a certain benefit from the income generated by the wind turbine, it would also change the picture.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, you know, I think if you look to I think what we didn't do enough is that this is a demonstration project, right? This is not an exploration project. So exploitation project. So that means that demonstration basically is the key of this project. And I think this is not well communicated enough to the Norwegian society. You know, when you bring that, you say we bring a lot of technologies, and we all know that some of them will not work, but it will give you a huge exposure and a very positive exposure, also your island. And we did that basically for a lot of technologies, especially hydrogen, because the other technologies are not known by the other people, most likely. But hydrogen is, and it's a very, very high, I mean, it's high scoring topic. And wind is not, because also there's a lot of resistance there, right? But I think this innovative, very small wind turbines, you know, that's another point than the big wind turbines, which everybody looks at. And I think we didn't position that well enough within the project.
Yeah, I agree.
If I may comment and also add something to what Frank and Søren said, when you communicate these technologies such as the wind turbine, of course you have to underline the benefits of the local community, but also the ownership. So what we discussed as well during the preparation of the white paper was the capacity building. So I would say that it is also we should also go beyond the simple economic return, and also understand that these technologies can also create circular economies, can create skills which are now going to be lacking in the European industry and also in the local communities. So if we also, in my understanding, if we also underline this topic of the ownership from the local community, then we are one step ahead. This is at least my take, also when discussing with the other sister projects. So I would say that something should be done in all the demonstration projects also to really underline this topic of the ownership and skills development. So yeah, this was just my intervention. So we still have a pair of minutes for the last questions. Otherwise, if there is none, we confirm the closure of the webinar, and we will soon organize a third episode. So just for your information, this webinar series is composed of 6 webinars, which are coordinated by our project partner, ERI, Environmental Research Institute in Scotland, by Lava Todorova, who is attending today the meeting. So you will receive soon online on our social media and also website further information on the next webinar. So before closing, I'd like to thank again Søren and Frank for the commitment and presentations today and availability to present, and also all participants for their attendance.